Hi, it's Lerald, and in this video I'm just going to give a little bit of an update on what I've done with my Earthshatter Berserker over the last couple of days, how I've kind of taken it through getting all 4 Void Stones, progressing into the in-game, doing some in-game farming, kind of what my plans are as I intend to progress further into Tier 17s, Ubers, all that stuff. So I'll just go ahead and kind of get right into it, but first, don't forget to like and subscribe if you find this video helpful, want to see more like it. Alright, so I have made some substantial upgrades to both the character and to the Atlas passive, or I should say to the character's passive tree, and then also like do some gems, so I'll just kind of run through those. I am still using the same weapon. I have picked up a better base, a higher level base. I've been occasionally, whenever I feel like it, kind of getting some Contempt Essences and slapping them on there in the hopes of getting a hybrid fizz roll on there and attack speed, or, you know, kind of just trying to make my way toward something a little bit better than the current one where I was using kind of a lower level essence, and then I just got lucky with a T1 attack speed and slapped the T1 crafted fizz damage on it. Obviously my goal is to go a little bit bigger on this one. Still not huge. This isn't going to be the permanent in-game weapon. That would be, as I kind of talked about, I made a video about crafting physical weapons before the league. I think my goal ultimately would be to start from a fractured base or a base that's over 20% quality, one of those two things, and then kind of make my way to crafting the full in-game weapon from there. But this would obviously represent a substantial upgrade once I'm able to get it there. I just haven't sat here and actually crafted it all out because Contempt Essences are pretty expensive, and I kind of don't want to just blow through like all of my chaos doing that. Now I have made some upgrades to gloves. For example, I have better implicits here, exerted attacks dealing extra damage, increased attack speed. I have made upgrade to boots as well, more move speed. Finally got 30 move speed boots and then 5% move speed implicit. I also have a bit of increased Warcry speed. I probably should fix that up to max with a Blessed Orb, but I just haven't done that yet. Made some upgrades to rigs. Again, haven't fixed that with a Blessed Orb. That's fine. I finally spec'd out of Bastion Breaker and then anointed it. I'll kind of talk about that more once I get to the passive tree. And then Helm, I can't remember if Helm is the same as it was before or if I have upgraded Helm. Either way, I think this is the same Helm as before. Either way, Helm's still doing pretty decent, but then obviously I made a pretty significant upgrade to my chest, got myself a 6-link, and so I did do exactly what I had said I had planned to do in the last video, where I have auto exertion support and it is now 2020, so it's giving a lot of cooldown recovery, which is good, making it so that we're really shouting all the time. Then we got Rallying Cry, Infernal Cry, Intimidating Cry, and Battle Mage's Cry all linked into that, and they are kind of all desynced amounts of quality. We got one that's over 20, one that is 20, one that is about 15, and one that's like 13, so they're all kind of desynced so that the cooldowns aren't all perfectly synced up and lining up, so that we're like, you know, doing one giant cry. It's sort of all staggered out so that they will constantly be shattering your Earthshatter spikes. And I can even go to like Blood Aqueducts just to kind of turn that on and show it off. And then because there is so much cooldown reduction on that, and because we get rage from all of our war cries, you know, we're very easily able to maintain full rage all the time, very, very quickly able to hit full rage, even without attacking, right? So this is something I do at the start of any kind of difficult boss fight, a Maven Invitation or whatever. I will just zone in, I will cry my way up to 49 rage, and then I will start the fight. Now, as I said, I did want to shift Battle Mage's Cry with Punishment linked into it. Probably going to switch over to Vulnerability at some point, but, you know, haven't done that quite yet. Punishment's still giving some good defensive value. But ultimately, I did want to switch Battle Mage's Cry in here because it only exerts the next 12 attacks, whereas Seismic actually has a good buff. I have leveled that up to 20, and it gives you a lot of armor. It gives you, you know, up to 25% more armor, which is pretty good. And then more importantly, it lasts for 14 attacks, so a little bit less often in terms of having to refresh it. Now, I'm still using Blood and Sand, still have Enduring Cry and Seismic Cry linked up to Urgent Orders. That's all the way it was. Leap Slam is still hooked up to faster attacks. You could hook this up to Culling Strike if you really wanted. That wouldn't be a bad idea. And then I have Herald of Purity, and I have Berserk. I have dropped War Banner because I find it pretty clunky. You know, you could use both. You could find a way to kind of fit in both. You'd have to give up some you have to make some sacrifices somewhere ultimately. And so I have just gone with Berserk as my preferred option. And the thing that's really nice about Berserk, as one commenter said, and I had also been thinking, but it was good of them to kind of put it into words. Rite of Ruin makes it so you lose rage whenever, or lose life whenever you're not losing rage. And so we offset that pretty well through things like Hardy, which just gives you a lot of life regen. And this is a good node. Like, this is really good to have. But If you turn on Berserk, you start losing rage. It makes it so that rage has a significantly increased effect, and then you start losing rage and you lose it faster and faster. This turns off the Rite of Ruin downside. Just makes it so that you have massively increased rage effect, and it actually applies to all of the effects of rage. Like, we get more armor from rage, or I guess increased armor from rage, and if we turn on Berserk here, we will start to lose rage, but as you can see, turned it on, armor went up. And now we start losing rage, and it gets a little bit more difficult to sustain, but as you can see, it applies to everything. It applies to attack speed from being a Berserker, it applies to more damage, obviously, since it is rage, but it also even applies to armor. So really good, and it kind of creates this cycle where you will build up to full rage before a boss fight, you'll pop Berserk as soon as the boss is attackable, slam, 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 burn yourself all the way down to no rage after a while, and then you will very quickly build back up to full, Berserk again, and kind of cycle that on and off as you're, doing damage to a boss. It really is an amazingly strong cooldown. I actually think it is better than it was now in the way that it's functioning at this point. I think I had done this in the last video, but I can't remember, but I've just been using Cast when Damage Taken along with Molten Shell and Blood Rage, still rocking with that same setup as before. And then I am using Awakened Melee Fizz and Awakened Brute. I just recently got those. I've also switched over to using Fortify as one of my supports instead of Fist of War. I have found that I don't really need the kind of occasional burst damage from Fist of War, and having that Fortify support give me fortification and then freeing up 5 points on the tree is really, really good. So now let's talk about the tree. A lot of the tech that we had in here is still in here, still taking Tireless, still taking a lot of the mana cost reduction. I have made my way out of this stuff over here on the right side. That's all been dropped for a bit, and I am taking Disciple of the Unyielding to help generate endurance charges on kill, just kind of sustain them. We're also still taking that Charge Mastery to give ourselves just a lot of leeway on charges, and I'm still rocking with the Frenzy Charge every 15 seconds on the chest, along with that extra Frenzy Charge from Savagery. I'm finding that to be really, really useful. Is taken as lightning is also really useful for keeping me alive. But ultimately I've found it really easy to maintain full endurance charges, and then I have added in a cluster jewel, and that is where a lot of the damage nodes that were in here have been kind of taken out, like this Bastion Breaker wheel is gone, and it's because I've added in a cluster jewel setup, and I'll talk about that now. We're getting battle hardened. Our three options from this cluster jewel. The large one is an increased physical cluster jewel. It really does need to be increased physical. The two-handed cluster jewel options really aren't that great. You get increased armor and increased fizz. Pretty good all around. Then you get Iron Breaker, which gives you increased fizz. More importantly, it gives you hits have a 50% chance to ignore enemy fizz DR, so you can get that and Bastion Breaker together. Boom, you're at 100%. You're good. You don't need to spec up into Bastion Breaker and take that mastery. Bastion Breaker has a pretty cheap anoint. I don't remember what all it is. It's something like Sepia, Teal, and Violet. Very cheap, if I remember correctly. That's very cheap. And then we have Furious Assault. Again, just more damage and attack and cast speed. It's all very basic stuff. It's damage, 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 and then a bit of defensive stuff, bit more consistent damage. You have a 100% chance to ignore enemy Fizz DR. That means they will never reduce your damage ever. Pretty cool. And then really the star of the show here is this medium cluster jewel, this exerted attacks cluster jewel. So there really aren't a lot of options. There's not a lot of wiggle room for your notables for this, and there's a couple of ways to do it. I ultimately crafted this just using alteration orbs, basically alt regal spam, and I just did that until I got this. I crafted another one that had, instead of battle hardened, it had master the fundamentals, which makes it so that you have the same amount of increased fizz damage. You have plus 10 all res, but then no armor. I really would prefer the armor. I really feel like a lot less tanky against physical damage. Now, the second cluster jewel, as I said, the medium one, really is the star of the show here. It has these two amazingly strong options. There are a couple of other okay options, quite a lot of them. You could definitely get by on a budget, but these two really are the ones that stand out. So the first is Warning Call. It gives you a significant increase to your armor, up to 100% increased armor, and it is based just on the power of your war cries. So being around enemies, makes it so that you get a lot of extra armor by shouting, and you'll note that it just says when you war cry, so you don't have to be near an enemy, you don't have to manually cast them either. It can be just triggered war cries. That works. And then more importantly, lead by example. When you war cry, again, doesn't have to be self-cast, it counts from triggered ones. You and nearby allies gain onslaught for 4 seconds. So all of my Warcry cooldowns, you know, my base ones are 4-ish, but like all of the triggered ones, 3.23, 3.05, 3.1, 3.28, all of my cooldowns on Warcries are under 4 seconds. So we have permanent onslaught with this build. As you can see, it counts from triggered Warcries, perma onslaught. So this is awesome. It also gives you 10 strength and dex that can help with requirements. So this is a vitally important node here that just makes you so much faster, makes you attack and move faster, huge quality of life, and you have easy permanent uptime on Onslaught. You are never without Onslaught, which means that you don't need a Silver Flask anymore. So you can swap in whatever you like. You can swap in, I'm going with a Resistance Flask, and since I have that Fizz taken as lightning, I'm using a Topaz Flask to give myself a bit more max light res. So instead of 82, I have 87. That is then kind of giving a positive feedback loop of giving me a bit more Fizz DR as well. So I do have the POB. As I said, I do have a POB for this. I will link that in the description. This is pretty much, I think, all I have to say about it thus far. I do have some plans for some future stuff, though. So I have gone ahead and gotten Ben's Helm. Obviously, I want to upgrade my weapon. That's the number one thing. That would be, you know, if I could go from this like 700 DPS Vol Axe to like an 1000 DPS Vol Axe, that would be a big deal. But, you know, just haven't actually rolled this up yet. You know, it's going to take a bit of time and money, and you know, how much money it takes, who knows, and that is really what's been giving me pause. But I have bought Ben's Helm, and I bought this Glorious Vanity, and so the way that Ben's Helm works, Echoes of Creation, it makes it so that you take a lot of damage every time you attack and you have Warcries exerting the attack. And so since we're exerting our attacks with 5 Warcries, that will basically hit you for your entire health pool. Now it has a range, it can go anywhere from 15 to 20, and it's actually pretty crucial that you get that roll low. 15 is really important. But even if you drop one of your Warcries, like I think the way that a lot of people do it is, I don't think I have General's Cry on hand, but they will take the Infernal Cry out, since all you're really using it for is an extra exerted attack, and they will put General's Cry in. General's Cry doesn't do anything for this build. It has to be linked to an attack, so it doesn't do anything, but it does count as a Warcry, so it'll generate rage, it will trigger Onslaught, pretty basic. And so then that would put them at 4 Warcries. Potentially they would socket Infernal Cry into this helm instead, and then give up a socket somewhere else. And then they would be able to get, this scales anywhere from 10 to 15% more damage for each Warcry, so potentially 75% more damage in all their slams, on top of all of the other bonuses, on top of overexertion support, wherever that is, on top of everything else. Humongous damage increase. The problem is just that it makes you do a lot of damage to yourself. Potentially 100% of your life is fizz every time you swing. So it has this really horrible interaction with attack speed, where the more attack speed you have, the more you're hitting yourself. You really do want to do a lot of stuff to make it so that you have more armor. There is one wheel in here. It kind of turns slams into bone shatter, basically. Inexorable becomes really good. It gives you this massive armor bonus while you're stationary, and anytime you're attacking with slams, you are stationary, so that does mean 50% increased armor for every time you're slamming yourself. So, you know, that's okay. It also means that you are hitting yourself. You're going to generate endurance charges. Again, very much like turning slams into bone shatter. And then I'm not going to show it off in here, but Glorious Vanity with Ahuana. Let me just pull up the wiki here. Glorious Vanity gives you, basically, it gives you Slayer Overleach. Immortal Ambition is effectively Slayer Overleach. So you have no energy shield, you can't regen or recharge it, and you lose it very, constantly. But your life leech doesn't get removed when you hit the cap on your life. Instead, you just continue to fill into your energy shield. Energy shield doesn't matter, I have like 11 of it, but it does mean that you have Slayer Overleach. So what you would do is you would take this cluster jewel set up here, move it up here, and then you would socket Glorious Vanity in right here and take Arsenal of Vengeance, which is useless to you anyway. And that all works really well, gives you Slayer Overleach. I could do that right now. The problem is it does kill off the ability to get Bastion Breaker, because that will be encompassed in that radius of Glorious Vanity, as you can see. It'll turn it into whatever random garbage, basically not anything you want, and so you would then want to anoint something else. Now, there are a lot of options for anoints. You can just go damage. You could go some sort of hybrid defense. I think that taking like Infused Flesh for just a bunch of recoup, since you're going to do a ton of damage to yourself, recouping 18% of the damage that you're self-inflicting is probably a good idea. Maybe an armor bonus or some sort of phys damage reduction approach would be a better way to anoint. I did already play around with this for a while. As the TikTok kids say, I committed unalive a bunch of times, and I did figure it out. It just is a little bit more squishy than I want to be at right now. So I think my plan is to upgrade the axe, level up to like 96 or 98 or something, and then switch over to this and accept that I might commit unalive a couple of times with Ben's helm, but really just try to roll it down so it's as little phys damage taken from exerted Warcry, exerted attacks, and then also get a lot more armor. Ultimately, that really is what it boils down to, is just having more armor. This is an insane damage bonus. Like, make no mistake, this is genuinely like 60, 75% more damage on the build, which is good. It just has a couple of weird effects where attack speed actually is like a very, very negative stat for your life. And then also having more life is also kind of not great because it means you're hitting yourself harder with every swing. So definitely a difficult item to balance a build around. Really strong once you have done so. Definitely looking forward to kind of getting that working, but just haven't quite gotten to the point where when I'm in a situation where my flasks are no longer up, I feel safe. So not fully committed to doing this yet, but I do have a plan in place for what I'm going to do down the line once I've got a few more levels and a bit more gear under my belt. All right, that is the update for the build. I'm really enjoying it. I've really been liking it. I think that the Earthshatter tech of having all of the different war cries and then being able to just slam out and just have them always detonating has worked really well. I think that swapping over to Berserk has been amazingly fun. I really like it. And ultimately, S tier build, absolutely loving it. Have not had any complaints, have not stalled at any point throughout the entire process. The only thing that's really been kind of bumpy or anything along the way has just been kind of figuring out what currency farming strategies I want to do. And, that's just kind of a big fun part of PoE. Not really anything bad about figuring that stuff out. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.